Hello, welcome to Emergent. I'm your host, Reed Summers. It's a pleasure today to be joined by two journalists who have been on the front lines of the fight to gain credible insight into the nature of what is now potentially a convergent cover-up. A cover-up not just by human actors of the presence of non-human intelligence, but potentially non-human actors as well. Today I'm joined by investigative journalist Chris Sharp of Liberation Times and Matt Ford of The Good Trouble Show to discuss their findings regarding the nature of a multi-decade secret crash recovery and reverse engineering effort conducted not only by this country, but by other foreign governments and in collaboration with other foreign governments. We're going to be going beyond information regarding black budgets and classified programs to examine the encounter between the human secrecy and non-human intent, and look at how and when and where our institutions may not just be a shield for the presence of non-human intelligence, but may also be somehow entangled with it. We'll be examining the findings of Matt and Chris's investigative work in their publication of an article in the Daily Mail 2 years ago, as well as a number of other articles that have since dropped, and basically just examine the disclosure landscape, everything that's happened in the past 2 years, multiple congressional hearings, variety of whistleblowers stepping forward, to examine this potential point of convergence where the infrastructure supporting this secrecy may have taken on both human and non-human dimensions. Is this at this point a collaborative infrastructure? It is effectively concealing the presence of non-human intelligence. It may also be concealing their activity as well. It's a pleasure to have this time with you all today. And if you're new to the show, I want to recommend that you like and subscribe the show, share it with others. I think getting out onto the front lines of this discourse, asking the hard questions, probing at the foundations of not just the cover-up, but also the non-human intelligent activity and operation that may be at play. So please do subscribe to the show. Also, a big shout out to my Patreon subscribers who are in the background making it possible for me to continue to focus on this much more than I have in the past, and to bring on great guests and carry on the great conversation that we've begun over the last year of Emergent. So thank you so much for your support. To begin with, I'd like to highlight this article that was published in the Daily Mail. This was published just about 2 years ago. 3 authors, Josh Boswell, Chris Sharp, and Matt Ford. And in this article, they uncover the role of an office within the Central Intelligence Agency in the U.S. intelligence community called the Office of Global Access. And in the article, they begin to outline and frame out the overall way that the recovery of crashed vehicles of non-human origin, as well as the reverse engineering of those craft to generate technological insights that may have found their ways into a variety of military and non-military platforms, is conducted across what agencies with what degree of coordination. About a year later, they both had a conversation on air on The Good Trouble Show. This was done one day before the hearings in Congress in 2024. And I'd like to share a brief clip of this, about a 1-minute clip, and then invite Matt and Chris onto the show, onto Emergent. So with that, let's roll the clip.
Understanding the DOE has access to the materials, and it is primarily interested in the propulsion technology. Whereas the DoD will be interested in other aspects like how it's made, the structure, maybe weapons technology as well. And the CIA would be interested in origins. And from my understanding, they are aware that these are non-human intelligence and multiple non-human intelligence, multiple origins. So they also classify the types of non-humans are actually piloting and controlling these crafts and what their intent is as well.
So you're saying that there are multiple species that are apparently visiting us on Earth?
Are we live on X?
Allegedly, yes. And I've been told that by multiple sources that are of high standing.
Do you think that they are studying alien bodies?
I do, yes.
Okay, this was just a brief 1-minute snippet from that excellent conversation, which in very many ways is a primer to today's conversation. And a lot of what came up in that conversation between Matt and Chris is ever more apropos today. We have key information coming out of the Age of Disclosure documentary regarding the potential coordination of the legacy program from the CIA. We have the outing of names, such as that of Glenn Gaffney at the last UAP hearings in Congress. We have some leads being profferred regarding the director of science and technology at the CIA as an important line of investigation. And then just in the last 2 days, we saw the Department of Energy launch its Genesis project, a multifaceted, high-octane effort to radicalize and revolutionize the way that exotic technologies and scientific discoveries are operationalized within the United States and brought more into the public and with greater access to society at large. We'll talk later in the show about it, but what connectivity there might be between the DOE and the Genesis program with all of the legacy efforts to recover these crash vehicles, reverse engineer these technologies, and as we will get into, potentially interact or collaborate with whatever the intelligence is behind them. If you're watching, I want to encourage you to ask your questions to Matt and Chris. I'm going to be putting a link in the various chats on the various platforms. So wherever you are watching, you'll see this link pop up. Please put your questions in the queue, upvote the questions of others, and we'll have a lively Q&A discussion to follow. So with that, I'd like to invite Matt and Chris onto Emergent. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Matt. Good to see you both. How are you both doing?
Good, thank you. Very, very good. It's good to see you. Thank you for having us on.
Likewise, and enjoying the lovely weather in LA. And all I got to say is watching that last clip, boy, I didn't look so hot back then. I think I may have lost a few pounds. So don't let it scare you.
Well, always good to be on an upward track, not a downward
Exactly,
spiral.
yeah.
So, no, it's a stressful arena to be working within. It's not neutral, it's oppositional. So I commend you both for your efforts to crack the enigma and bring out some critical insights to the public, to Congress, and to the UAP community. So very important work, and thank you both. So I guess to kick it off, gentlemen, just tell us a bit about your professional background. What got you into this fight for UAP knowledge, truth, disclosure, whatever you want to call it, and what you're working on at the moment?
Go ahead, Matt.
Let's see how I got into this crazy thing. Well, I've worked in network television for close to 30 years, and worked for Jimmy Kimmel Live and a whole host of other folks. And so that's what I do in my day job. I guess it was around 3.5 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was looking to get my Twitter account verified, and at the time, this is of course pre-Elon, you could get that check mark by writing a bunch of op-eds if you were considered a journalist. So I began writing some op-eds, mostly national security stuff on like U.S. Russian nuclear policy, kind of dry stuff like that. And anyway, I decided that I wanted to start covering the UAP topic and writing about some of the legislation that Senator Gillibrand and Rubio had put forth. And it just kind of grew from there. I felt that this was a national security issue that was being glossed over by people in the Pentagon and elsewhere. And moreover, the public, I felt at the time, really wasn't aware that this was a significant issue. And so I started the Good Trouble Show, and they haven't looked back.
And Matt, I have to thank you, because it was actually you interviewed someone who attended the first Soul Symposium back in the late 2023. It might have been one of the first shows of Good Trouble, I'm not sure, but that was one of the first kind of interviews, videos I watched that really piqued my interest and queued me up to get back and be more involved myself. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, good stuff. Chris.
I come from a comms background, and I guess I've always taken an interest in this since I was young. And I think following the 2017 New York Times article and the Bob Lazar interview on the Joe Rogan Experience with Jeremy. It perked my interest again, and then I think COVID kind of cemented it for me as well, because that was a black swan event, at least in our lifetimes. And I just thought to myself, well, actually, if we have a blind spot towards a pandemic and we don't believe it's going to happen until it happens, I mean, what other blind spots do we have? And, when I was ill myself with COVID, I could hardly breathe. And I just remember the Pentagon at the time basically confirming that the videos that were released following the 2017 article to the Stars Academy, that they were legit. And it kind of like inspired me, let's say. And then I just created Liberation Times because I quit my job, and I just suddenly found myself having too much time in my hands, and I thought, let's just create a website because I'm a bit bored. Let's just report on some news stories and stuff. And it just kind of happened. It wasn't planned or anything. It was something just started in my son's bedroom, and it's just grown from there.
Same on my side. And I think that's how it happens. We all get called into this field. There's a magnetism and there's also a vacuum of credible voices, good thinking, good journalism. So it's like, you can do nothing else but step up to the plate and start hitting the ball because nobody else is. So, great to be on air together and have this exploration. If you could just take us through, post article 2 years ago and all your work since, as well as other key information that you might have come across, other people who have spoken to you. What is the current state of what we are calling this, quote, legacy program, this coordinated cover-up of both the crash recovery, reverse engineering efforts, but also the presence and activity of non-human intelligence? What picture is beginning to form for you both?
Ooh, Matt, please go first. That's
yeah, always put me out there first, Chris. Yeah, thanks for that. That whole article, which in my view was a real bombshell. Chris and I have been good friends. I have an enormous amount of respect for Chris. I know him not only as a journalist, but as a good friend and wonderful father. We had been chatting about stuff related to the legacy program for quite some time, and Chris reached out in one of our conversations and just said, look, I'm working on this thing dealing with the legacy program running under the auspices of the CIA in the Office of Global Access. And I said, hey, I would love to contribute. I can bring to bear some of my sources in and out of the defense and intelligence community. And so we just kind of started from there. And Josh Boswell was, I think, the third person to come on. Well, obviously he was the other guy. So anyway, it was really surprising. Well, actually, kind of not surprising. Surprising, not surprising, in terms of how complex this whole thing has been laid out. How the CIA runs all of this, and Chris can certainly dive into more detail than I can in terms of this being under the Directorate of Science and Technology. And it was really, in a way, kind of frightening how all of this has been going on, how all of it has been hidden from Congress, all of the misappropriation of dollars, legislative oversight. It really was a complete abomination in terms of what the Constitution of the United States stands for, and the congressionally mandated role of Congress having oversight over all of this. So finding out that the CIA had been up to all of these kind of dirty tricks, and of course in Dan Farah's new film, The Age of Disclosure, They go into exactly what the three of us uncovered in terms of the CIA involvement of crash retrievals and recovery of these vehicles of non-human origin, and the dissemination of these vehicles either to private defense contractors or elsewhere within the government. So yeah, it was. I think it was a bombshell article. I was super proud to be a part of it and be able to bring my sources to bear. But really, this was really Chris and Josh. I was just kind of they were the ones that did the meat of the work.
And so, Chris, I'll pass the baton to you. So, you kind of cut into the thick of the matter here. What do we now understand? What do you both understand about the nature of this office within the CIA? How is it coordinating various efforts? What is its overall internal structure, if you have any insight into that? What do we need to know about this Office of Global Access and the other offices of the CIA that might be involved?
Yeah, so the Office of Global Access, that's only used for retrieval missions, from my understanding, in contested territory. So if something's, let's say, maybe crashed in Vietnam or somewhere like that, in a jungle, you will need the Office of Global Access because that's what they specialize in. They're known as the tunnel rats, I believe. So their kind of like day-to-day work is kind of getting materials, let's say, into really, really difficult places to get into, and then retrieving such material as well. So this is what they're just brilliant at doing. So when it comes to retrieval missions, they do the same thing in terms of getting access to those areas. And what will usually happen in regards to retrieval missions is that they'll be coordinated, from my understanding, between the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology and various kind of like technical offices within that, and also the Directorate of Operations. We're talking Special Activities Center and the kind of clandestine forces that will kind of provide security and whatnot. And the Technology Management Office within the CIA is involved as well, and that will undertake like planning, execution, and whatnot with such retrieval missions. And yeah, it's logistics are very, very important, such as and also security is important as well, especially when you're going into contested territory. So in such retrieval missions, you will use you could use JSOC from DoD, which makes it easy because you can keep on flipping between Title 50 and Title 10. So Title 50 is kind of like the intelligence community as authorities that they're able to use their set of rules that they abide by when they carry out missions. Title 10 is the same for the military. And so they'll use JSOC for security. And they could also use vetted private contractors as well for security. And the aim of the game is just to get that material out as soon as possible and transfer it to the relevant contractor, which will help kind of like reverse engineer it. So there's a lot of coordination, but I mean, retrieval missions, it very, very much depends where they are found in terms of the foreign craft, whether it be at sea, whether it be on land. Sometimes, from my understanding, things are retrieved from space as well, deorbited from space. And so it gets really, really complex really, really easily, as you can understand here. Yeah, it's
I'm gonna pepper you both with some questions because I I listened with a fine-tooth comb to your conversation, and obviously have read everything I can from Liberation Times on this topic. My curiosity was piqued on the topic of coordination between the U.S. government and its, quote, foreign adversaries, and that there might have been indications that the U.S. and Russia actually coordinated on possible deep sea recoveries. Any new insight or just kind of your own personal take on the nature of the collaboration? Because we think of this as a arms race, right? A Cold War, it's highly oppositional. Are there indications of near present collaboration or anything else?
So after the Cold War, there was a moment where Russia was kind of like suffering a lot, and it didn't have as many resources to do what it used to be able to do. From my understanding, there was something that did crash into waters that Russia would have access to, and Russia basically said, "Look, CIA, you could have this one." And I think that was just a sign of the times when relationships were falling a bit. But I do believe that kind of like, on the face of it, you've got a situation, where the Russians and the Americans are in a very, very tense situation. But I do believe in the intelligence world, there is more coordination and engagement that is actually going on. The same with China as well. The CIA have historically had quite a close relationship with China. So wouldn't surprise me if there was some form of coordination. I don't know how closely they would share information. I hear conflicting things. Sometimes I hear that, China and America and Russia, they kind of like work together on this. And then other times you kind of hear that there are different kind of like non-human factions, and they are basically pitting nations up against each other. So yeah, it's, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Matt.
No, I mean, other than what was said in the film and what I've heard for a very long time since I became involved in this topic, is that we are in a unacknowledged Cold War between China and Russia to be able to successfully reverse engineer all of the tech and deploy it, and that would not surprise me. I personally believe that to be true. We certainly know that China and Russia have crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs, and it is all the more of an incentive for President Trump, this current and his current administration, to do the right thing and pull the Band-Aid off, tell the world essentially the basic facts, maybe not anything, of course, that would jeopardize national security. But because you've got these adversarial nations, Russia and China, that are working on the same thing, the last thing the United States should want would be for China or Russia to disclose first. It would cause incalculable damage to the reputation of the United States. And I think that in and of itself should be incentive enough for President Trump and his administration to come forward and be the leader on this. Don't be reactive, be proactive, and own the conversation.
Yeah. Here on the show, we examine the potential connectivity between human and non-human operations and programs and intentions. And I think there are growing indications of a potential connectivity, that there's not a convenient air gap between, defense agencies and governments and whatever NHI is, but there might have been points of interaction. I think of the Holloman Air Force Base incident that came up during the Age of Disclosure documentary. Dr. Eric Davis described how multiple UAP landed, multiple non-human entities deboarded, interacted with CIA Air Force personnel. I think also of Dan Sherman's recent testimony regarding the cultivation of intuitive communicators to interface between the Air Force and what he would describe as the gray, he describes a gray program, but also a gray set of entities. And so have you come across any information, or has any credible testimony, been introduced to you to suggest or give further dimension to what that interaction, interface, possible collaboration might be?
I mean, I've heard this from credible sources that have worked this topic as part of their job for the federal government. I've heard it from credible sources from more than one source that aren't even related. So I certainly believe it to be true, knowing these individuals and knowing their background and their level of involvement in this sort of thing. So it doesn't surprise me at all. There clearly is a huge amount of disinformation that I think the government and the intelligence community and the Pentagon have really kind of worked overtime to hide that kind of stuff.
Right.
So then you have to ask yourself, well, who gave these folks permission to have these discussions or maybe arrive at some kind of agreement with whatever this non-human intelligence is? Certainly, Congress was not brought into the mix, and nor have the American people.
And I think thank you for the keyword, agreements. That's really the question, is have there been direct engagements and potential transactions or contractual relationships? Chris, any insight from your side on that?
I think the history of this stuff is far darker. That's my own opinion. I can't prove it. From my understanding, what I have heard, I haven't managed to get it corroborated, but it always sticks in my mind that there was contact made between Nazi Germany and some form of kind of like Nordic beings, and that part of the America's operation in terms of getting the Germans over to America to help was also part of kind of like introductions in terms of non-human intelligence. That always sticks in my mind. I think the darker roots relating to UAP and this whole dimension do go back to that dark period of history. That's what my instinct tells me. Obviously, this is just opinion here. But yeah, that's where it takes me.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. I mean, there's the fabled Greada Treaty, Eisenhower era treaty, in which transaction took place for, I guess, technology in exchange for access to the public, to the territory of this country. I can't verify that happened, but there are a lot of rumors of such interactions taking place. And as we begin to gain further insight into the non-human biology, deceased entities, right? That phrase is used right in the UAP Disclosure Act, and I would imagine for a reason, is because part of what's been recovered are non-human entities, and they have not always been deceased. And so what kind of interaction was attempted? I'm curious about your thoughts on the undersea, under ocean aspect of this. And, I've kind of taken an interest in considering the USO phenomenon, the unidentified submerged objects. And I know you both have called out the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office as potentially involved, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and other contracted FFRDCs and research labs that might be the recipient of recovered underwater wreckage, vehicles, what have you. Do you have any insights into the undersea, under ocean aspect of this?
Yes. So in regards to underseas recovery, from my understanding, the CIA and its maritime branch within the Directorate of Operations will coordinate with Woods Hole, and I know that now Lockheed have kind of like a submersible as well, so private contractors, let's say, and they'll coordinate with the US Navy. And in the middle of it will be the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, which from my understanding is a joint kind of office run between the CIA and the US Navy. And what they'll do is they will basically just recover the vehicles that will be under the ocean. It's interesting, and we've got Glenn Gaffney on the record now as well, stating that part of his job within CIA was tracking other people's submarines under the oceans, and he worked at the Glomar Explorer, where they recovered a Soviet submarine. Do
you have any further insight into Glenn Gaffney? I know his name was outed by George Knapp at the UAP hearings in Congress.
Yeah, I don't. He's an interesting person, but it's just worth noting that you've got to look back at all of the directors and deputy directors of science and technology. We've got Dawn Mayer-Eakes, I think he's been named recently by Christopher Mellon, Stephanie O'Sullivan as well. I think those are the three main people there. And apparently, I think it was Michael Schellenberger who wrote that. I think it was Dawn Mayer-Eakes who was interrogated by a US senator in terms of the what she knew about the recovery, retrieval missions and UAP, and she lied apparently, and it was very, very evident that she was lying. And I think we need to hold these people accountable, and let's hope that Tulsi Gabbard will do something.
Yeah, I'll add something.
Go ahead, Matt.
I'll add some. I'll add something regarding Glenn Gaffney. So not this hearing, but the hearing previous UAP hearing, House hearing under the House Oversight Committee. I submitted a letter to Congress that was entered into the Congressional record, and it essentially exposed the fact that Glenn Gaffney was sitting on this secret technical advisory group for the Pentagon's AARO office, or the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. On the Good Trouble show, I had revealed to the public that this technical advisory group that Sean Kirkpatrick put together was in existence, and that members of Congress caught wind of this. I don't know if they saw it on the show or whatever, but they went to Kirkpatrick and wanted to know, well, who is sitting on this committee? And as I understand it, Sean Kirkpatrick refused to provide that information. Now, AARO is supposedly set up as a place for people that have signed national non-disclosure agreements regarding any UAP issue that they were exposed to, or if they were part of any sort of special access program, to go and make what is called a protected disclosure to AARO. So these folks are supposed to come in, spill their guts. They're not going to go to jail. It allows them in a classified setting for these people to come, and these whistleblowers to come and tell AARO everything that they know. Now, we know that these whistleblowers have been subjected to death threats. I know Lou Elizondo in The Age of Disclosure discussed how him and David Grush were being considered for targeted assassination by a group of, I think it was 28 different people on some kind of. Yeah. So anyway, these whistleblowers face a direct threat to their physical safety. Now, what I submitted to Congress, that is in the Congressional record, is one of the people that was, I don't know if he continues to be, on this technical advisory group was or is Glenn Gaffney. So here you have the guy that is essentially one of the primary gatekeepers of the legacy program that has been responsible for the harassment of whistleblowers, probably involved in wet works regarding all of this stuff, destroying of people's careers, all manner of stuff. So here you've got the guy that is one of the primary gatekeepers of the UAP legacy program, sitting on the very advisory board for AARO, who is supposed to be the body that these whistleblowers can go to. And as I stated in this letter to Congress, this is a direct threat to the physical safety of whistleblowers, because I don't know, but I would imagine that when these whistleblowers go in and make these protected disclosures to AARO, it would not surprise me if one of the main guys on Sean's AARO advisory board was back channeling all of that protected disclosure information into the legacy program. So it's that kind of subterfuge that is got to stop.
And we'll get into kind of what questions Congress should be asking, who might they want to subpoena and bring on the record. I think that'd be a fruitful conversation to begin to look at. Back to the underwater, if I may linger there for a moment further. Are there any notable cases that have come to your attention that highlight what kind of vehicles are being recovered, and also where are they being taken to? What is the infrastructure set up to receive, very large vehicles? I mean, we've heard tell of football field-sized USOs, right? Tracing or tracking nuclear submarines. We've heard, tell of that. So what is the infrastructural reality behind not just recovering the crash vehicle, but storing it, exploiting it, and then distributing key insights into other kind of technological endeavors?
Yeah, so from my understanding, again, it's the Office of Naval Research, which is coordinating the transfer of these craft and overseeing the exploitation efforts. And if you look at the Office of Naval Research, look at all their offices globally, they are everywhere. So they are perfectly positioned to be able to help with the logistics when it comes to this. And then I think in relation to such retrievals, I think just on one example that was given was that, it might be General Dynamics or something like that, someone that specializes in submarines, that might be given that craft just depending on its likely capabilities, let's say. So you just got to make the decision who's best placed to help kind of like reverse engineer this and exploit it. So that's how it's done from my understanding. It was once said to me that the Office of Naval Research is much more important when it comes to this than the Office of Naval Intelligence, and they know a lot more. So yeah, that's kind of like the insight that I could provide on that.
Yeah.
And Reed, I would add, I don't really have anything to add in terms of what Chris so eloquently laid out, but one element regarding the USO issue is I've had multiple sources tell me that USOs, UAP, whatever you want to call them, have and continue to tamper with not only our land-based strategic nuclear deterrent, but our sea-based leg of the nuclear triad. So you've got these Ohio class submarines that are a cornerstone of U.S. nuclear deterrence with the Trident missile on there. Currently the Minuteman III is only configured with one warhead, but the Trident sea-launched ballistic missile is, I believe, it's up to 10 and multiple independently retargetable reentry vehicles. And we know from what we have heard on the Minuteman platform that UAP have tampered, disabled, and in many cases tampered with the war plan in the missile reentry bus. So essentially retargeting the warheads. Well, this is going on in the ocean as well. So this
Matt,
is like something that Congress needs to.
In what incident? Do you recall in what incident the UAP retargeted the missile control bus in that scenario? I hadn't heard that case.
Yeah, so I was told that by multiple sources as well. But anything that gets into the targeting realm, it tends to be a conversation killer.
Okay, not a public case then. So not a known public case. Okay, got it. Understood.
But I was told that occurs on the Minuteman platform, and now while I wasn't told that was occurring in terms of retargeting on the Trident platform, what I was told in pretty much these words was that UAP are tampering with the sea launch nuclear ballistic missiles on that leg of the triad.
Interesting. If I may just kind of tunnel into this. Go ahead, Chris, and then I'd like to go a little deeper.
This is something really, really important that Matt's touched upon. I think a lot of people are trying to steer the attention to the US Air Force here, and they're not really steering the attention to the US Navy. And perhaps that's because when it comes to such missions like retrieval and exploitation of USOs, basically, you've got a capability here in terms of USOs and being able to track and identify, locate, and disable subs equipped with nuclear warheads. So what happens if we are in a Cold War in terms of exploitation? If China or Russia manages to exploit that capability first, then the whole nuclear deterrent of the USA and its allies is basically meaningless. And
Absolutely.
Russia and China could launch multiple warheads at the US, and that deterrent will be gone, basically. And it's game over. So this is why it's so important, and this is why it's so sensitive when it comes to the oceans.
And are you thinking, Chris, there about the case that that Matt was talking about re-entry vehicles in the near space upper Earth atmosphere, or more nuclear warheads on nuclear equipped submarines underwater being tampered with?
Yeah,
or both.
Well, for me, it was the nuclear submarine aspect, and the point is what these subs. They're made just so they can go undetected, basically. That's the whole point of nuclear submarine, that you could just park it up, and that will be kind of your option should the US mainland be destroyed by nuclear weapons. You've always got this to play, But if that's rendered incapable because they've already been tracked and located and disabled, the whole thing is meaningless.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, and I know we're kind of diving into this a little bit, this little kind of silo here. Up on screen, I'll just share this. This was as you could call it, a disclosure by Jim Shell on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you both ran into this, but basically describing a control system put in place, from what I could gather, to limit domain awareness in space. Is there, and that this is connected to the UAP issue? I think that's somewhere in this verbose slide here. Any insight into kind of either the limiting of domain awareness that's being described here, or other kind of intentionally installed systems to limit deterrence, responsiveness, or any other capability?
So this gets into an area that I can't really speak about, other than to say this is absolutely true, but I can't elaborate any further than that.
Understood.
Yeah. There's major.
Put it up again.
There's major repercussions relating to this. So I reported this story. Basically, so there's this whole initiative at the moment, the Golden Dome, which provides kind of like security against all types of missiles, including nuclear missiles, basically the space-based system. This is like a critical project, again, of like keeping the US safe from nuclear attack, and this kind of like this control system, basically, it makes it just completely irrelevant. This Golden Dome program. So Shell warned that the evidence suggests likely interference with the sensing layer critical to a missile defense shield proposed under the Golden Dome, and it's notable that General Michael Anthony Gweitling, that's how you spell his name, he would be very, very aware of this problem, let's say, and he currently serves as the program's director for the Golden Dome. So it's a national scandal, if that is correct, and I think it is correct. But yeah, apparently it's about UAP, and he's like basically saying that allies and adversaries can see certain parts of space, whereas Space Command and Space Force can't, and it's because of a agreement signed by NRO. So it's a National Reconnaissance Office, which is undermining their efforts basically to regain full kind of like domain awareness in space.
Right.
Yeah, and it really ties our warfighters' hands behind their back. So let's say you have various intelligence ISR platforms, space-based platforms that that are providing information. They're providing the raw data, but then if you have this control mechanism that sits right below the raw data that is disseminating or filtering what information is going downstream to NORAD, U.S. Northcom.
Right.
That's an issue because they shouldn't be holding that kind of information back. So
Right.
when you've got the raw data essentially being tampered with, it, in my view, is I can't think of it's yet another thing that jeopardizes the national security of the United States.
Right. I think of the 60 Minutes testimony by the head of U.S. Northcom regarding their inability to track low-flying, small-sized drone-like objects. I mean, this is NORAD. This is Northcom. How can they have such a domain blindness? And, apparently Arrow is out on the street looking for new capabilities from the civilian sector for domain awareness. And it's like, well, why are you asking us, right? You should be asking up the chain, not down the chain of into society and the private sector. And so we're getting into the kind of the meat of the matter, or the belly of the beast here, which is, what is the nature of the penetration and the kind of systems it is configuring, installing inside of the executive branch and, of course, the legislative, the elected side of government, to prevent awareness of this issue? Is it simply to obscure understanding of UAP, to hide it from public purview? Is it part of an effort to enable some sort of collaborative arrangement with other foreign adversaries or with non-human actors? So I'm curious, kind of your thoughts on the state of, I guess, the connectivity and the state of the penetration that might be taking place either by human or non-human actors.
I would say, in terms of that aspect, my mind goes towards, like, why would they stop Space Force and Space Command from having full domain awareness? And it could be related to three things. It could be related to the UAP themselves, technological craft, like basically, if technology has been exploited, from my understanding, it has been exploited, and there are advanced craft which are very, very secretive, that could be one of the other reasons. And the third reason could be deorbiting UAP from space. So those are the three things that stick in my mind, and the NRO are very, very well aware of this, from my understanding. And in terms of how deep the penetration is, so what I would add that so this is where the DOE comes into it. So the DOE, under the Atomic Energy Act, it can classify nuclear materials. As part of that, they can also classify other materials, which are related to nuclear materials. So I think the interpretation is that, should these other materials be declassified, then you would put at risk knowledge of nuclear materials that are also classified. So that could be a way of the Department of Energy being able to classify craft that have been developed as a result of exploitation efforts, and those craft would be using unconventional power source. You would have heard Jeremy Corbell mention recently that no one's talking about the power source. That's really, really interesting. And I would add as well is that the Directorate of Science and Technology from the CIA, part of its job is to protect any exploited technology that has been a result of exploitation efforts. And I think when it comes to this, you've got to keep on looking at where one meets the other. So you've got to look at the coordination between Director of Science and Technology within the CIA and the DOE. So you'd be looking at their intelligence and counterintelligence office, for example, and you'll be looking at who's in charge of liaison between them and the CIA. So that back and forth relationship, basically, in terms of what they're protecting, because that's a really, really big part of it, I believe. I believe that they have developed very, very sensitive craft, which is, I think we mentioned, maybe in the documentary, that they would only declassify this stuff. Well, they wouldn't even declassify if it was like a war, basically. They wouldn't even show their hand then. That's how protected these deep technologies are protected. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's really a misuse of the classification system. The sticking all this stuff in the bucket of restricted and previously restricted data, in particular transclassified foreign nuclear information. That is not the place this stuff belongs. But you can absolutely take this to the bank that everyone will discover down the line that the Department of Energy has been kind of a hornet's nest of a place to hide stuff away regarding this topic. Like the whole DOE system is so convoluted. You're going to find out that lots and lots of stuff was purposely put into DOE to hide it from Congress.
Right.
A lot of stuff.
I
and
recall,
it was done on
I believe it was
purpose.
a moment in one of the Senate hearings, maybe, no, it wouldn't have been a Senate hearing. I think it was Rep. Luna querying a rep from the DOE about their interface with JSOC and pressing them and pressing them. And then finally she says, yes, we coordinate with JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, which is, as you guys are expressing, part of what is used to invoke Title 50, Title 10 to get, capabilities into the field rapidly for rapid recovery. I'm curious just what you guys think about Project Genesis, and is this potentially a way to get certain capabilities out of their special access program silos into a new kind of paradigm of research, scientific development, and deployment? Is there any connectivity to the UAP issue?
No idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's hot off the presses, so who does, right? Well, interesting stuff. So let's also, I want to ask you both on the underwater and on ground, on land, have you come across any credible information that suggests underwater facilities, bases essentially, or underground facilities associated with this in any of the with any of the testimony that's come your way?
Yeah. I think it's been mentioned previously that there is a focus of subterranean spaces, and this would be the remit now of the US Army. But yeah, I from my personal understanding, there are kind of like bases, for instance, under Pyrenees, and those are subterranean, and then also you've got kind of undersea bases as well. One within the Mediterranean, and you may recall the Friendship case from Italy, I think in the 70s, when a bunch of human-looking kind of like non-humans visited just these random people in Italy, and they showed their sources and stuff, and they just got them to do really random activities for them. And it was just like the weirdest case ever. And I think Timothy Good catalogued it. And there was a photo taken of one of the non-humans who was like a giant. And I do believe some Italians have actually looked at this photo, this giant man, because he's standing by a tree, and calculated his height based on the tree, saying that he's just very tall. No, it's just, again, this is just kind of like what I've just heard throughout the years, and I've heard nothing to basically veer against that. But I don't know if you've heard anything, Matt.
No, I'm going to borrow a phrase from Pentagon Public Affairs Officer Susan Goff,
Oh, no.
however the hell you say her name, and I'll just say I have nothing for you at this time.
Okay, fair enough. I love it. So yeah, I mean, we hear from people along numerous coastlines, I think of in Peru, who claim that there are, offshore bases, facilities, centers of activity, or hotspots. And so I wouldn't be surprised, the Mariana Trench. I've heard Guam, Cozumel. Of course, we've heard a lot about Catalina Island as hotspots of UAP transmedium activity, USO presence and activity. And, there are some discussions about undersea anomalies, many of which have been, to my knowledge, resolved as natural. But yeah, it seems to be, we're sandwiched between two domains of unknowability, space and sea, right? Us terrestrial mammals. So our lack of observational capabilities in the oceans definitely suggests if you wanted to operate and hide the operation, the ocean would be a great place to do it. So
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Anything on land that you've come across to suggest, underground black sites or other facilities used in the staging of operations? And of course, I mean, we're dipping into the more speculative side, but we have heard from remote viewers, about remote viewing black sites in various underground facilities in which non-human and human were both present and collaborating. Any insight or information come your way on that?
I mean, I've pretty much heard the same thing, but that has mainly been from other UFO researchers. It's not something I've particularly dug into, but it to me it makes complete sense. I would put it this way: I would be surprised if that were not the case.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think some of the non-humans look human as well, which makes it even more difficult to track. And you do question sometimes. It does make you very, very paranoid.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know there's discussion in government circles about human-looking non-humans. That's the phrase that I've heard. So, if they're concerned about that scale of, I don't know, is it subterfuge? Is it hybridization? Is it mimicry? Then it just kind of suggests what kind of program might underlie it. I'm curious, we've been hearing more and more. Again, Dr. Eric Davis talked about multiple species of NHI. The Nordics, the Greys, the reptilians, as it's been described subjectively. We heard even last week, David Grush was on Fox News and talked about, a human biological sentience piloting these craft. And said so with quite a degree of confidence to suggest like this is part of what has been recovered and is being engaged with. Do you guys have any insight into the kind of the force composition of NHI, the species present, where they might be embedded, and how they might connect and plug into this increased, understanding of the infrastructure of all these different agencies, government, non-government, defense contractor, and international as well, outside this country?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point you bring up there. So I think it's been mentioned previously that these things are having dogfights, and it's always reminded me kind of like of the warring Greek gods and how the Greeks kind of like saw them. Like in every kind of like religion, it's kind of like humans are at the center of everything. Whereas when you look into the Greek myths and legends and how they saw the gods, like humans were just kind of like, we're a sideshow. It's all about the gods and their caches, and they're kind of indifferent to us. And I think it's, I think David Grush told one of his friends who spoke to Megyn Kelly about this aspect in terms of being indifferent to us. And having their own.
Walter Kern, was that Walter Kern appeared on Megyn Kelly?
I think it was Walter Kim, the evangelist guy. No.
Okay.
no, someone, that was a joke. Someone got it wrong, saying it was Walter Kim, who's like an evangelist guy, and like Walter Kern got all frustrated about it. But
gotcha. I missed that one.
Walter Kern, yes, that's it, not Walter Kim. That was correct. Yeah, so that really sticks. That's really, really interesting to me. And when we're talking about kind of CIA, they're looking at motives and they're looking at origins and whatnot. So that would be the responsibility of the Weapons and Counter-Proliferation Mission Center, the WCPMC. And if you trace back its lineage, a section of the Manhattan Project basically got transferred into it, and from my understanding, the Magenta craft was part of that aspect of the Manhattan Project that got transferred to that aspect of the CIA. I think that's when it was called the Central Intelligence Group, and then from then on, became the CIA, and then this office transformed into that office, transformed into that, because it
Right.
reorganized so many times the CIA does. And that's where it can
Right.
trace its lineage to. And it is that place's mission to actually identify anything, whether it be a drone that they don't know where it's come from, or it be a UAP. So when it comes to all these drone flyovers and stuff like that, that's whose job it would be. So they'll have a bunch of other intelligence products coming in from a variety of other places within the Department of War and other intelligence community places, and they'll have a look at those products, and they'll also use their own human intelligence. They'll get stuff from the NSA coming in, they'll get stuff from the National Reconnaissance Office and the NDAA coming in, and they're able to kind of like use all that information to give an assessment into where this is all coming from. And from my understanding, that would be the same place that would be tasked with kind of showing where the origin of a certain craft, non-human craft, would be from. So that would be the place, from my understanding, if you had to say it's from this species or it's from this species. But I mean, if that is the office that inherited the magenta craft, then that's very, very interesting indeed.
If communication were to be undertaken, do you have any insight into what agency or office would handle that?
NSA.
Interaction? Okay.
NSA, I mean, you've got all these like points that converge, you know, it'd be NSA, I think every place really, NSA, US Air Force, CIA aspects of that would kind of be involved, crossing over where needed. But it's also been told to me that, you know, the US Navy and the US Army kind of have had some projects as well. So, you know, if they make contact with a species that's underwater, for example, that wouldn't be the US Air Force necessarily. It may be the US Navy and components of that working with NSA and the CIA. So, yeah, it gets really, really complex when it comes to these things, doesn't it? And it all depends on the situation.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm curious if you guys have come across any testimony regarding off-planet infrastructure, facilities, coordinated activities on the moon, on other orbitable bodies in the solar system.
I have not, but it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a question in the queue. I was looking at it a minute ago, and we will get to the questions, everyone. Thank you for asking, and please keep putting them in there. About, you know, is the legacy program a breakaway civilization, which is, I believe, an idea that originates with Richard Dolan, historian, that this program has gone so far, has reverse engineered these technologies to such a level that they have found ways to get off planet, are operating it freely in the solar system, etc. I don't personally have a solid take on whether that's the case, but we are hearing increasingly about alien reproduction vehicles, ARVs, and these capabilities that have been operationalized, not just by this country, but by others. And so it does make you wonder, you know, is the moon beyond our reach or not? You know, and if you can get to the moon, where else can you get to?
Right.
Yeah,
definitely. I agree. And when you're looking at breakaway civilization, you have to take lots of factors into consideration. You have to look at the finance world as well, because from my understanding, involves different factions of breakaway civilizations, and there are different components in relation to hedge funds. And this is where it gets really murky.
Right, and maybe that's a question to kind of wrap up this section of the conversation is, as for the connectivity between human and non-human, this potential collaborative ecosystem of infrastructure, facilities, staging, operations, etc., where would we look? I mean, is it follow the dollars? What would be the best kind of path to better understanding the nature of how the human and non-human have come together operationally?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that.
And I think you just kind of got to it there, Chris. And I will be having some folks on the show who might be able to speak to kind of like looking at the financial aspect and where is this money getting siphoned off to. And that might, who knows, maybe the paper trail reveals more than we would think.
It's not just that. It's also kind of like the financial system. This is where you start looking into bearer bonds. When you look into Japanese gold, you know, they reportedly were able to find more gold that officially existed in the world, and they didn't want to flood the market with this gold, and it was basically off the books. And I think you've got to go into this really, really deep, dark world that gets people killed, unfortunately, because that's when you start getting really, really close to the truth. And, it's a very, very deep, dark, murky world. And if anyone's brave enough to really dig it deep into it and kind of like follow up with the evidence, they're a braver person than me.
Right. Well, there's a reason. I mean, there's probably a good reason why nobody has yet, right? That the system is configured to weed it out before it takes hold. I was surprised in the age of disclosure that they flashed on screen, I believe, some DOE documentation and wording to talk about, physical impacts, repercussions on personnel who disclose, who become whistleblowers. I'm not sure. Have you come across any information regarding retaliation beyond what we know so far from those who have come forward? Missing persons as well. I know some are trying to investigate whether that's a parallel reality to this.
I haven't heard anything beyond helicopters buzzing people's homes and basically people's security clearances being taken away just for another reason. Just they happen to have an investigation against them.
Right.
Not related to UAP or anything, but the timing's always quite interesting, let's say. And they have their security clearance taken away from them, and then they find they can't get another job, which needs security clearance if they do eventually get it back. So those are the kind of things that are usually done, and that seems to put most people off for disclosing. But Gary Nolan did mention that someone within the White House, I believe, did threaten him with death. Matt, that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was aware of that before that was public. It is, this is the kind of stuff that does happen.
Is that related to Gary Nolan's statement on the Jordan Peterson podcast regarding someone telling him he was going too far? Just curious. Yeah,
it's related to that, but in a separate podcast, I believe that was filmed before, he actually did say that like someone threatened him with death. And then you've got to start thinking about the White House's role with this. So if this was all covered up by a president like Eisenhower said, let's say, you would want to make sure if you were the president and you were responsible for the cover-up that you still had some oversight, let's say, within the White House. And I think that even though presidents now may not be read in, there is still kind of those places in the White House that continue to have that oversight over these programs.
Right.
Yes.
Right,
yeah. National Security Council.
Yeah. And some others as well, I think.
Right.
I won't go too into detail because I don't want to end up in a ditch.
Fair enough, Chris. Yeah, I think we all have to walk carefully along those lines, but I'm hearing plenty from plenty of different directions about not just black helicopters, but brake lines being cut, homes being invaded, unmarked men in fatigues and trucks showing up at people's homes, intimidating them at the doorstep. So I'll bet that just scratches the surface.
Going back to the CIA article that we wrote for the Daily Mail, we were extremely locked down in terms of our communication security, and that article went live at 7 a.m. Pacific time, and a few hours later, I was on a plane to Las Vegas for a non-UAP related project. And so it was about like 4 or 5 hours later, I'm sitting up at the top floor bar at the Waldorf Astoria on the Strip, and I'm answering emails and whatnot about the article that came out, and a operative from one of the defense contractors came in there to physically came in there to harass me. And so it told me two things. One, that our communications had been monitored because there was, I didn't announce that I was going to Vegas. Only a few members of my family knew, and I think Chris knew. But here I am, an American journalist, sitting at a bar. I don't drink, by the way, so I'm sitting there drinking a soda water, and I've got one lady that comes in to try and honeypot me, and then 15 minutes later, a gentleman comes in and essentially says some coded language to me from across the bar, and the message was clear that I needed to watch what I was doing and shut the hell up. So for that kind of harassment to happen to somebody covering this topic as a journalist, I mean that stuff is, I mean it's unacceptable.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we're hearing, even worse happen physical intimidation and harm. And I know people who have been the target of that. So it's a real concern. I'd like to turn to the questions now and put this up on screen. Thank you, everyone, for putting them in the queue here. This is a question from Jonathan Davies. Please ask the guests to comment on the FBI taking the lead role above Arrow. There's been a lot out of the FBI recently.
Well, I'll say that when I first learned of the FBI's involvement, I was a little bit skeptical of their intentions. But I can say, after speaking to multiple sources that have had a long history of interacting with this particular group, I have heard nothing but positive things about what they're up to, what they have been able to dig up. So I fully support. I personally have never interacted with them, but people whose opinions I trust that come from the government have told me that they are doing really good things and are digging up a lot of stuff.
Okay. Chris, any thoughts on the FBI? How they fit into all this?
I'm on the fence when it comes to that. I'm hearing that people who have met operatives from the FBI have had quite bad experiences, and it's shaken them up a little bit in terms of what's been exposed to them. And this is the reason also I don't want to travel to America in the near future, because they're very, very interested in who my sources are and how I get certain bits of information. That's what I've been hearing. And also, it is their job as well to read articles
Right.
on the UAP topic. Any new article, it's their job to read them.
Right.
So, I won't be going to the US in the near future. But that's just from my experience. It might just be limited, and I don't know what Matt knows, but I mean, I'm on the fence. That's why, because I'm hearing good things, I'm hearing bad things as well.
Fair enough. I'm sure they're watching this show, or will at some point, and if they do, just three good citizens working on behalf of humanity over here. So, and I mean, there's so many people who have a story to tell, right? And their story will get heard, and it will get out. It's unstoppable at this point. Okay, let's move on to the next question here. Besides remote viewing, what are some credible ways of communications or methods between sovereign human beings and multiple other than the human existential species? I guess this is about communication. Are you aware of any methods or modes of communication that might exist?
Just prior to your show, we were just live. We had Michael Batista, who is a psionic asset, and he spoke extensively about how he's able to communicate with these various races of non-human intelligence. And essentially, what he said is that anybody can do it. It just takes time and practice. It's not just like a switch that gets turned on. But he said that everybody has this ability. This isn't something you need some kind of genetic predisposition to, but it is a learned skill, and it does work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've heard myself that the government does use psionics and has a sizable number of them deployed on various projects. So you wonder where those abilities arose, and I mean, I can't help but think back to the intuitive communicator, potential program, Project Preserve Destiny, in the NSA. Go back to the NSA, right, when we talk about communication. So we'll see over time, I guess, kind of where the locus of reception and transmission might be taking place within official circles.
Yeah. Consciousness seems to be very, very relevant when it comes to this. I mean, just imagine lots of people who are very, very senior in terms of aerospace companies. They enter the field very, very technical minded, and they leave the field just fascinated and absolutely obsessed by consciousness. And that's, from what I understand, is because these craft are actually operated through consciousness. So they're obsessed by that, and they're obsessed with people who have potential abilities.
Those abilities, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you might be aware of, what's, I guess, described as the GATE program, pursuing individuals with psychic psionic abilities. I think back to the testimony of Michael Herrera of incidents in Southeast Asia. Any insight into that dimension?
No, not other than what I've publicly heard from Herrera. I do not.
Yeah. Okay.
If you unlock that ability, you can communicate with them, and then you can operate the craft as well. So it gives you a decisive edge, doesn't it? So
right. Yeah, that might be another paper trail to look at, which is how are those individuals accessed? How are they brought into whatever programs exist? Because those may be the means by which communication is undertaken. So let's go back to the Q&A here. I've got another one on screen. Let's see if there we go. Chris and Matt, do any of your sources discuss the probability that these alien races could be here for the resources of our planet?
No, nothing like that. I mean,
nothing resource related.
So for instance, water is ubiquitous across the solar system. We think now. So many of the other materials that are on Earth, you can find other places. So there doesn't seem to be anything too special with Earth. Although I would say that you've got to look at things like deuterium as well in the ocean. So when you go to off the coast of California where the Tic Tacs are spotted, that's a high. That's a place where you've got a lot of heavy water there, for instance. So when it comes to kind of like the fuel source, they're using that. That's potentially of interest. That's the only thing I can find in terms of materials. That's the only thing that I could think about.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, I have a question actually. Before the show we got on together, I was watching a clip of yours on LinkedIn of you interviewing Lou Elizondo, I believe recently, possibly after the age of disclosure, specifically on the topic of abductions. And I was seeing Lou go further than I've seen him possibly gone before in terms of articulating the implications and the consequence of whether abductions are happening. In terms of those who have come forward to you as journalists, as sources of information, any insight into whether abductions are a valid reality? Is the government involved in any sense? Are they aware? Are they concerned? Any data points on abductions?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many sources and people that I've interviewed that have said unequivocally that this is indeed a reality. I personally believe it to be true. Just the sheer number of people who have or continue to hold high security clearances, people that are former government, have worked for the government, and particular United States Air Force, that have been abducted. There is zero doubt in my mind that this is taking place, that it's taken place for a very, very long period of time. I believe that the United States government is well aware of this. I believe that that is one of the fundamental reasons for this cover-up and for continuing to engage in active measures to keep it swept under the rug. But I have zero doubt that is taken place. I think it's taking place. It is really calls into question the ethics of these beings or how they view us, and that really, if President Trump were to go in front of the podium and say that we have been that we are being interacted with by non-human intelligence, we have craft, this has been going on for a very long time. The second question that a member of the press needs to ask the president is, are American citizens, let alone people across the world, being abducted against their will by various species of non-human intelligence?
Yeah. Chris,
Yeah.
anything on your side?
Yeah, I think the CIA is very, very interested in individuals that are being abducted. They want to know why they're being abducted. This goes back to the origins and goes to intent as well. What do they want from us? And I think they're very, very interested in people who are abducted and continue to say they're being abducted, because if that is the case, they want to know what they're doing to them. They want to study their blood. Other aspects of them, what makes them so special, why are they being chosen? So yeah, and if they are able to track UAP, then they should also be able to potentially track abductions as well. So they're very, very well aware, and I think it's one of the things that keeps a lot of people up at night, because they know it is a reality, from my understanding.
Yeah, and you also you have to ask yourself, and this is sort of tangential. I can never say that word. A tangent to this particular problem, the whole abduction thing. I mean, in the literature, it is somewhat common, as I understand it, that things tend to escalate. So maybe you first see an orb, and then a year later you see a craft, and then the next thing you know, there are beings in the bedroom. Why would AARO, the Pentagon's AARO office, or Department of War, whatever you want to call it, why would AARO, and whose previous leadership, and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, has publicly stated that they had access to all compartments, all sensor data. They could access anything they wanted, any a special access program, a controlled access program. They have said, Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director of AARO, has said on the record that nothing was off the table. They could get access to anything. So then the question you have to ask is why AARO is going to independent scientists, independent scientific organizations, and offering them large sums of money to partner with them. If AARO has all of this access, why are they offering large sums of money to organizations and scientists that we all know, and in many cases up to 6 figures? Why are they doing that? Why is Enigma Labs, who, by the way, some of their funding came from In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm, and who also has received funding from people involved in OSINT, open source intelligence. Why is Enigma? Why did Enigma spend a decent amount of money to purchase UAP data from a particular European organization that would sort of be the equivalent of MUFON? So why are they spending all of this money to suction up all this OSINT information, open source intelligence information? Why is Enigma spending that kind of money? Why are they being shady as hell about all of that? Why is AARO offering oodles of cash to people? And I've spoken to some of those people that AARO approached, and of course they smelled a rat, and to their credit, they turned down the money. But it to me, it indicates a desire to collect open source intelligence from people all over the world, so that they can likely get information on, well, who is interacting with this non-human intelligence? Where are there areas or clusters where it's happening more than others? I think it is all related.
And this is modern, right? Is the Aero office as it stands today?
This is going on today. So Aero's office, under the leadership of John Kozlowski, is offering large sums of money to scientists to quote unquote partner with them. So I think part of it is to gain information. I think part of it is the intelligence community through Aero, the CIA through Aero is trying to put these honeypot deals out there so that they can gather information on what kind of sensor technology is being developed by these scientists and these organizations that are not part of the government. They are people like all of us that are trying to get to the bottom of this thing. So they want to know, they want to find out what tech these organizations are developing, what sensor technology these organizations are developing, what sensor fusion software and AI analysis programs they're developing. Aero / the intelligence community, Aero / CIA, they want to know what these organizations are actually able to see up in the sky. So let's say that there are some Blue Force programs, vehicles flying up there. CIA, Aero, they want to know about this. So what better way than to offer these organizations large sums of money to partner with them, and in what I believe are not altruistic motives. I mean, you have to, the question would be then, well, does this partnership allow Aero to have access to their raw sensor data? And then you then have to ask yourself the question, can Aero be trusted not to go in and manipulate their partner's raw data in such a way that it generates a false outcome that is not supportive of the scientific data? Is Aero is one of their goals? The CIA and Aero is one of their goals to buy off these organizations, or at least get them addicted to the money, infiltrate them, manipulate the raw data, and in such a way that it comes to the desired outcome of Aero and the CIA. I mean, the whole thing stinks to absolute high heaven, and we know historically you cannot trust Aero. Aero lies. Aero lies to the public. Aero lies to members of Congress. You've got the former director of Aero, Sean Kirkpatrick, and the deputy director of Aero, Tim Phillips, going out there and doing perception shaping and shaming Congress, calling them idiots, all this kind of stuff. I guarantee you, Tim Phillips and Sean Kirkpatrick, they're not doing this unsanctioned. This is part of a ongoing communications plan. I think people will find out that is part of this whole thing called Aero. I have publicly stated Aero should be defunded yesterday. You cannot trust the leadership of Aero. I know there are good people working in Aero, but at the same time, the people up the chain of command, John Kozlowski, he's going to do what the folks up the chain of command say. Sean Kirkpatrick, Tim Phillips, they're going to do exactly what the people up the chain of command tell them to do. Execute on this mission of spreading disinformation, get in bed with these organizations. The whole thing is corrupt.
Right. It almost sounds like a control system being put in place in the civilian private sector UAP detection efforts at a time specifically, and I know this because I'm working very intensively on it, when there is a variety of citizen research and technology groups out in the field collecting groundbreaking data on UAP. Yes. And so is there an effort to, you could say, buy satellite time, redirect telescopes away from the object of interest? And what better way to do it than through the offer of money in a very resource-starved environment? Exactly.
It takes money to put on my show. It takes money to put on your show. It takes money to research UAP. It takes money to run the Liberation Times. All of this stuff, it costs money. This doesn't come
Right.
for free. So when you have people like the Tedesco brothers who are putting in taking money out of their 401k to conduct this kind of research, it takes money to do this stuff. And
Yeah.
it's not, you can only dip into your 401k for so long. So Arrow and the intelligence community, they know this. The Pentagon, the DoD, they know this. So what better way to infiltrate and control and derail than to go and offer these organizations and these scientists large sums of money? It's hard for them to say no. They got to put food on the table, and they know that it's not a bottomless well of money that they have to go and investigate this stuff. The whole thing stinks.
Yeah, I think it's a good moment. I was going to do this at the very end of the show, which I do on most of my shows these days, but put up on screen here just some information on the 2026 UAP Detection and Tracking Summit. We'll go full screen on that, which is a 2-day online conference open to the public, highly accessible, basically featuring all of these different science and research technology groups that are converging at this time to offer revolutionary new ways of detecting and tracking UAP in the public interest, to create a publicly accessible, researcher accessible, revolutionary data set based on collaboration and a kind of coalition of the ready and the willing to enable and to equip society with the key insights it needs regarding what's over our cities and our coastlines and sensitive infrastructure. So definitely head over to that, register for the Detection and Tracking Summit. So yeah, a lot of concerning trends there in terms of the control systems being put in place to limit domain awareness, limit citizen awareness, broadly speaking. And so, yeah, thank you, Matt, for your efforts to call out those efforts at disinformation and efforts to kind of converge and coalesce society's capabilities underneath a DoD banner. That's pretty alarming. I want to get back in our time now, and I hope you both have time. I know it's late there, Chris, so thanks for sticking with us. And you might have a kid under the table too that has to get put to bed. So if so, he's been very nice and quiet and amazingly chipper to be in on this conversation. I want to touch on this question of influence. And I know this is kind of out beyond the bounds of what we can verify, but I'm curious if you've come across any information that suggests forms of covert or overt influence by a non-human actor upon human leadership. And at this point, I'll just to kind of cue that up, put on screen the ATIP slide 9, which is a leaked slide from a presentation from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a PowerPoint. And you'll see somewhere in this list here, influence of leadership.
Makes sense to me.
Oh, there it is. It's in the first sentence. Influence decision makers, that the scientists exist for an enemy of the United States to do that. Any insight or intel from your side of the fence on that?
Yeah, you've only got to look at the drone incursions, haven't you? I mean, I think I've mentioned before, like we're talking about, penetration of US facilities in the physical realm. And if you look at some of the historic cases, UAP have appeared as balloons. I think there was a case in 1946 where a French pilot shot at some balloons, which he thought were Japanese from the war, over US territory. And when he started shooting at the balloons, they transformed into saucers. And there's a bunch of other cases as well where there's balloons, but apparently they're not balloons. And it just makes you question the drone incursions that we're experiencing at the moment in Europe, that we've experienced in the US as well. Could they potentially be UAP as well, just kind of disguising themselves? I think if there's anything that we know, they are using forms of disguise. They're using signature management, any way just to kind of disguise themselves and not be seen. They're low observable for a reason. So yeah, that is manipulating society, I guess, isn't it? So. I think that's very, very important to take into account.
Yeah, historically, there are
I
cases
could,
where mimicry has been at play. There appears to be a capability to mimic prosaic craft, which is actually very endemic to how species interact. There's often mimicry in species interaction, so not too much of a surprise. Yeah, Matt, any insight on influence, especially influence of decision makers within or with outside government?
that I have nothing on. But just kind of touching back on what Chris was just talking about. I mean, there is a long history in the literature of these things using mimicry, and I've interviewed. I think a total of 5 law enforcement officials who interacted with these drones back in 2019, 2020 in Nebraska. And it was all of these interactions. It was clear to these law enforcement officers, even though some of them appeared like prosaic drones, the ones that were very, very large, the size of their pickup trucks, they all unanimously felt that these were things of some kind of non-human origin. They did not appear to be terrestrial, and the behavior of such certainly did not lend to any sort of prosaic conclusion. Now, could it have been reverse engineered UAP tech that China was flying over the U.S.? Absolutely. I think that kind of stuff does exist. But yeah, but in terms of influence on leadership, that would be certainly be a primary goal of if you had the kind of capability of doing that. I can't see why a nation wouldn't try to deploy that.
Right. I think you were referencing Chris Grooms, who was the Ord County police chief. He's been on Emergent. I know he's been on Good Trouble, good friend of my show. So shout out to Chris. Yeah. And in some of the reported activity of those craft, they seem to be almost like mapping rural America in some sense, tracking dirt roads, in grid-like patterns. Very structured activity that made no sense, in terms of a U.S. government capability. So
yeah,
okay.
and keep in mind, so Chris has been public about it, but there were other law enforcement officers that I spoke with who did not want to be quoted, did not want to go on the record, and certainly didn't want to come on the show. But they all pretty much had the same experience. And one of the things, excuse me, to note about Ord, Nebraska, is that there is no military or intelligence value in that particular area. There are no nuclear equities or no power generation facilities. There's nothing of intelligence value that you could look and say, well, yeah, I can understand why China or Russia would fly drone-type objects over in an area. This was these are all towns of just a few thousand people at most. There's just nothing out there. And so then it leads you to the question, well, if there's nothing of intelligence gathering value in those areas, why would China or Russia be operating in that environment? Which then, in my view, leads me to the conclusion that these are vehicles of non-human intelligence.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Back to the influence question, I'm curious if you've come across any information that suggests any form of kind of psychological control mechanisms or perception management. I'm thinking of, for example, the Collins Elite that's been described as this group of high-ranking officials that prevent inquiry into the phenomenon because they believe it is demonic or evil in nature. There's long been, conjecture of an MJ-12, MJ-24, MJ-32. Lou Elizondo in The Age of Disclosure talked about a group of, I believe it was 23 officials tasked with, maybe it was 28, disrupting he and David Grush's health, well-being. Any insight into kind of mechanisms of, again, controlling the way leadership or the public perceives the phenomenon or is able to inquire into it?
Go on, Matt.
It's a tricky question, I know.
You go first, Chris.
I believe that MJ-12 was a thing. I've heard that from various sources, and I believe that there is a group of officials, mainly in technical roles, who are bureaucrats and basically working together to ensure that this is covered up. And they're working at those points where DOE meets CIA, meets NSA in these kinds of roles. And that's what I have on it. But I haven't really heard much more beyond that. And you got people like Bobby Ray Emergent, who I'm told will never ever talk, apparently. And he was apparently one of those.
The name again? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Bobby Ray Emergent, he was one of the old guard. I don't know if he was MJ12 per se, but I do know that he was one of the gatekeepers.
Right.
That's one of the guys.
And I know my question was a bit backwards because first, is there a group controlling information or shaping perception? I think the indications are probably there are. I guess my line of inquiry is, is it possible that they are being influenced by an external entity, right? Or are we just looking at, the legacy program or the Christian right or some other group of, kind of homegrown resistance to further inquiry? And, to broaden the lens, is what we perceive as the human secrecy in part nested, in fact, in a larger non-human orchestration of some kind? That's really the question. Or does it, the buck stops with the U.S. government or these individuals, MJ, whatever? It is at this point.
Okay, I'll mention something now. I think that this whole kind of topic is just weirder than I ever imagined, anyhow. And from my understanding, and it's something I know he's seen as an unsavory person, but from my understanding, when he said this, he was correct in that dark journalist basically said that when engineers were going on to craft, they started seeing things like dead relatives and stuff like that, sort of people on the programs. And they start seeing really, really spooky, weird things on these craft that are entering. So that's manipulation of reality. So I think there's definitely an aspect of that. And obviously we know that there's the hitchhiker effect as well. And I'm pretty sure as well that the people inside some of these programs, when they're involved with recovery missions and tracking and stuff like that, I think the phenomenon starts taking an interest in them, that there are abduction experiences, that there are non-humans entering their homes and stuff like that, because they've been involved in these programs, and they end up being very, very scared about their experiences. But I guess as well that there's a different potential layer to this as well in terms of what we've spoken about before, agreements and whatnot, which I'm aware that, there is such things of agreements, and that would suggest that there is actual contact as well, which is ongoing, and it's gone back decades.
I mean, it only makes sense because we know through the literature and testimony that NHI has the ability to interface with human consciousness and interfere with what a human perceives, what it sees, what it hears, how it acts. So it in my view, it only makes sense that there's some level of influence in some way, shape, or form on leadership. In the nuclear cases, it is often the case that these nuclear launch control officers were abductees as children. There are all these kind of weird, weird threads. I'm a good example. I had never had anything happen my entire adult life until I started covering this topic. And within a day of having a off-the-record conversation with a particular senator's national security staff, where they said UAP are real, it's not China, it's not Russia, it's a national security issue, blah, blah, blah. And then the following day, I've got an orb above my home, and also co-locating with that a bunch of really bizarre ass paranormal stuff that went on in my house for 4 to 6 months. And the only conclusion I could come to was that it was me looking into the topic or looking into NHI and then I don't know how they sense it or whatever, and then they in turn look back at you. It's I guess in a way, if you were staring at somebody at a bar, and they had your back to you, and if you stare at them intently enough, that individual is going to sense something, and they're going to turn around and look at and see who's intently staring at them. So this whole hitchhiker thing, I believe I've been victim to it, and I certainly know all the weird stuff is true. I never knew that it existed. I never knew that there was any sort of correlation or some kind of connectivity between the two. But I can tell you, as somebody that has experienced all this weird stuff multiple times in my home and above my home, the shit's real.
Yeah, Matt, I have as well. And so, I mean, when you begin to get in the game and really look at this, it seems like the phenomenon is responsive. There might be some sort of way to identify a unique signature of mind, to conduct some kind of psychological surveillance as to understand who's looking, what they're doing as a result, who they're talking to, et cetera. Difficult speculative territory, right? Hard to prove any of that. But with all of the reports of the hitchhiker phenomenon at play and anomalous psionic or psychic engagements that have been reported, I think it begs us to consider that not only is there a there with this phenomenon, there is a they there. There is an entity with an intelligence. We are in some sort of bidirectional relational engagement. We're beyond nuts and bolts, craft in the sky, crash vehicles at the bottom of the ocean. It really is about the nature of the intelligence and its intent. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to ask you both, if you both have time, just your thoughts on intent. If there's any kind of key indicators or signals, key information that's kind of given you a sense of what the scenarios of intent might be that are at play. And I think Chris had to go off camera, so we'll maybe start with you, Matt.
I mean, for me, I personally, I don't think it's good. If there is a clear pattern of sort of deception and hiding the fact that we are being surveilled, certainly there are cases where they are being obvious in terms of tampering with our nuclear weapons. But there clearly has been a ongoing pattern of reconnaissance, and it's being done covertly by whatever the hell this stuff is. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what is all of this intelligence collection? And intelligence collection, what is their purpose in doing so? They're trying to hide it. People are being taken against their will in terms of abductions. Our strategic and even tactical nuclear weapons have been tampered with. Certainly, our nuclear strategic posture has been degraded at times due to interference by UAP with both our land-based and sea-based nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. So, when I hear all of this, and it's been going on for a very long time, in my view, that's not good news. In my view, there is a reason that they are presently with these drones continually operating in our military's restricted airspace, not only here but all throughout Europe. Right. What good reason? What altruistic reason would all of that be taking place? I can't, from the pattern of behavior by these vehicles, this non-human intelligence, as long as it's been going on, and the fact that it has increased in operational tempo by an exponential amount in the past few years, I don't think it's good.
Yeah, some pretty concerning indicators there, and not a lot of demonstrable evidence of a beneficial intent or intentful activity to disclose and to do so in a way that enables the global community to respond coherently and in a unified fashion. So some concerning indicators. I'm not sure we have Chris with us still. We do. Okay, great. Any thoughts on intent, Chris? Oh, he had to mute. Taking care of family, I'll bet. I think he's back. And while we're bringing Chris up, there we go. We got you, Chris. Yep.
Sorry, there's some good, some bad, but it's just a mixed picture, basically. It's like humans. So it's the mixed intent, basically, from the non-human intelligence perspective. Again, apologies for this. Sorry.
No worries. You're fine. Family, and it's late at night in the UK. We really appreciate it. We're going to kind of wrap up. I have one more question, which is basically, what should elected leaders do next? Where should Congress be looking? Who should they be calling into the next UAP hearings on the House floor? Where do things go from here, in your opinions, to crack this open further? We can start with you, Chris, and that way you can drop off and head to family.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. I probably need to go now. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. We'll catch up later, and we've got a lot of go for it, Chris. We've got a lot of questions, and maybe we can get an AMA set up with Matt and Chris, and the audience can ask all their questions. Okay. Thank you so much, Chris. Great to see you here and be joined by you. Okay. Yeah. Any thoughts, Matt, on the road forward for Congress for elected leaders?
Well, I think Congress needs to continue to dig. I think that Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who's really just had between her, Eric Burlison, Tim Burchett, I mean, there's really some outstanding leadership there. They need to bring people in a classified environment, and in my view, interview them. But I would personally do it with a lie detector, and the same thing that happens when people with certain TSSCI clearance with polygraph have to go through in order to maintain or apply for their clearance. I think that kind of thing needs to happen. I think that it's not the top layer that you need to be bringing in. It's the people 2 to 3 layers down, the people, the lifers, not the elected, not the elected officials. It's the people that are all these senior executive service level folks that have been in there for a long time. I think that you need to bring leadership in from the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. You need to put them under oath, but I'm telling you, all of these, in these security classification guides for these really lockdown SAPs and CAPs, they have the legal authority to lie to Congress. So of course these folks are going to get up on the stand and lie to members of Congress directly to their faces. It's in the security classification guide for a bunch of these SAPs and CAPs. So the only way you're going to be able to do it, in my view, is put them in a skiff, interview them, put them under polygraph, because otherwise I think they're just going to lie, continue to lie. They've done it for 80 plus years. They're going to continue to do it. You see the former leadership, Sean Kirkpatrick and these others, flat out lie to Congress time and time again. They've got the top cover to do it. So there needs to be some other legal mechanism to compel these folks or perhaps incentivize them to come clean about what they know. The second thing that needs to happen, and this is really the key, the executive branch has to do this. This is by and large classified under the executive branch and under the National Security Council. The other bucket, as we mentioned earlier, is classified in the DOE and some other sort of cubbies that all this stuff is stashed away in. But the stuff that sits under the NSC, Trump has the legal authority to unilaterally declassify it. This is going to take a president to right this wrong. Congress will constantly hit roadblocks. They need to keep trying. They need to keep holding hearings. All of that increases public visibility into the whole problem set. But at the end of the day, it's going to take a president who decides we have to stop all this BS. He goes and he declassifies certain things that are sitting in the NSC that do not jeopardize national security, do not give away any national secrets regarding reverse engineering of craft of non-human origin. It's going to take a president to do it. I am hopeful it will be President Trump. I think that he has the cabinet in place, the right people in place that have been read into a bunch of these SAPs and CAPs that can advise him, provide good counsel to President Trump. But in my view, he's really got to be the one that's going to do it. I'm personally not a supporter of President Trump. I'm a Democrat. However, I 100% would support the administration and give credit to the administration if they were finally able to do what previous administrations of both parties have refused to do. The presidents that were read into this whole thing to some degree or another. I think our best chance is with this administration. I am fearful that in the midterms or in the next presidential administration, if Democrats do end up in charge, I'm fearful that will set us back significantly in terms of disclosure. So really, I'm really betting and hoping that President Trump does the right thing. It politically makes sense for him. He already has been given the top cover by Rubio and various people in this film. The playing field has been primed by this Age of Disclosure film. Now's the time to do it. And if anyone understands show business and media, it's President Donald Trump. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There will be no other media event in history that will ever top President Trump going in front of the American public and the world and stating unequivocally, non-human intelligence, it's here, it's been interacting with us, we have vehicles from it. Nothing will ever top that, and it will forever cement in American history President Trump's role in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful moment, and I know everyone's trying to call forth the political power that would be gained from it, and try to evoke an ego or two, right, and get certain individuals to provide that top cover. I certainly hope it happens as well. It as you're indicating, as a Democrat, but one who would support not only the sitting president, but also be concerned about their own party. I think it's reasonable and rightful to step outside the lines of our political, cultural, religious affiliations to respond to what may be a species-wide engagement. I would say beware the art of the deal, thinking that we can make deals, draft agreements, enter contracts with a non-human set of forces. They are probably playing 5D chess on us already, and seeding the very thoughts that they would prefer we voice at the diplomatic table. So I think we have to gear up and armor up, and really think in the human interest, not just in the national, the personal, or the party interest, because those are domains set up to generate human conflict over the power, the prestige, the popularity that might arise from disclosure of this. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for being on the show, and Chris as well, who had to drop off. Pleasure talking again with you and exploring this new frontier that we stand upon as we acknowledge the existence of NHI and our increased engagement with it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Love your show. And folks at home watching this, please support this podcast. These people like Reed and others, you got to support them. That's the name of the game.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yep, the support helps. I've got up on screen here my Patreon for those who would like to become a supporter. It's right there. Also, want to encourage you to support Matt's show, the Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. I've advised Matt to call it just the Matt Ford Show because you are the name and the face and the brand. But Good Troubles is good too. There's nothing wrong with some good trouble. So thank you, Matt, for all your work. You've been just power-packed in your efforts to get great guests on the air, great perspectives out in the public, and critical information as well as a journalist.
Back at you, brother. I appreciate that.
All right. Yep, good. Well, great. And for those watching, thank you for being here. Possibly I can get Chris and Matt to answer a few extra questions because there's plenty in the queue that we didn't get to. So maybe we can line up an AMA on Forerunner and they can log in and answer a few more of your questions. Critical moment right now. We're getting increased signals that non-human intelligence not only exists, but is present and active, that it is biological, that it is intentful in its programmatic activity in the world, and that it is impacting multiple countries, multiple layers of those countries' intelligence, defense, and elected government structures. So it's coming into greater clarity that this interface is occurring. And I know on Emergent in the months ahead and with the guests I'll be having on the show over the next few months, I want to walk around this emergent new engagement and examine its economic, political, environmental, social and cultural, even religious dimensions to explore what happens when civilizations collide. What is this new cosmic Columbian exchange? Whether it's information, technologies, capabilities, etc. And really understand how are we changing in response to contact with them? And how do we guard certain key red lines to retain our species' security, sovereignty, and ultimately our survival in a larger exosystem of life beyond our world? So this is the new interstellar platform upon which we need to learn to stand and to walk. And so thank you again for being here with me on Emergent, being a forerunner, a contributor to forerunner.readsummers.com, the community platform I developed for you to carry on this conversation and to engage with others who are responding really to a calling to get involved. And there are ways to get involved. Keep watching the show. I try to provide opportunities at the end of each show for ways you can participate. And the UAP Detection and Tracking Summit, I highly recommend registering. Seats are limited. This is going to be a groundbreaking conversation where we look at what are society's capabilities to gain aerial intelligence, aerial intel on what is in our skies operating over our cities without needing the government or the DoD to give us those tools and abilities. So with that, thank you so much for being here with me on Emergent. I look forward to our next show in the times to come. I am taking some time off in December. Recommend you do so too. Friends, family, and a comfy seat by the fire await. So enjoy the holidays. You'll see less of me until January, and then you'll see a lot of me. So with that, I'll say good night. Thank you for watching.